My bedroom is made up of an accumulation of matter, materials, and objects. My question is, what is the difference between these objects in my room and the recycling bag downstairs, which is overflowing with matter? Is it because I have immediate uses for the materials in my room, and the rubbish that has been separated from the other matter in the house does not immediately benefit us anymore? But who are we to decide when those materials are no longer assets to us? From a structural perspective, the inhuman matter that lines my bedroom walls is no different to the equally inhuman matter that has been discarded. However, Jane Bennett's article, Vibrant Matter, has answered that question for me, and that is all inhuman matter matters. Her article really showed me a completely different perspective to the concept of waste and rubbish. How it structurally is absolutely no different to any of the objects that I keep in my room. In my opinion, the only difference is the way we as people consider the plastic that wraps all of our food and possessions as a byproduct that was created to be thrown away. However, the issue comes when all of those discarded pieces of material all congregate and exist in great masses. Bennett describes a toxic ooze being produced from the towering piles of matter in garbage hills found just outside the US city of Newark. Toxic and corrosive metals and liquids all pooling together, exhaling unhealthy fumes as it sits there, rotting away, forgotten by the very individuals who placed it there. A piece of artwork that really reminds me of Bennett's article is Tony Craig's stack. In my opinion, it is a controlled and purposeful physical embodiment of what Bennett describes seeing at the garbage hills outside of Newark. A 3D cube of various pieces of randomly selected matter, all fitting neatly together in a very visually pleasing way. The way the artwork is curated also allows a cross-section viewing of all the materials. This feature gives us a perspective that we lack when looking at a naturally occurring accumulation of rubbish. We are able to really observe the contents within the mass, paying attention to each piece of wood, plastic, and concrete that structures the sculpture. Looking beyond the large piles of mass, really observing individual components of it is something that Bennett really hones in on throughout her article, and that is something I have been intentionally adopting during my research for this short film. This is why I have been documenting my walks around the beaches and footpaths of Falmouth, photographing materials both natural and unnatural, as well as filming the world I see around me as I move through the landscapes. I have two questions that I would like to answer during my research. The first is how overconsumption affects the world around us, further exploring the impacts it has on natural structures. And the other question, which is something I personally have always struggled with, is what part do I play in this? And what would be the most healthy and productive way of addressing these concerns? This second question, although personal, also originates from talking to others about how they're feeling towards overconsumption and their own concerns regarding how to properly dispose of these materials once they have fulfilled their purpose. To aid in my understanding of these questions, I have chosen to break them down into two smaller and straightforward points. Starting with the first question, I want to focus on how the process of creating these single-use materials impacts our environment, and the second is what it does to our environment once it has been discarded by us. An article written by Kayla Vasahelu from the University of Colorado Boulder details exactly how the production of single-use plastics affects our environment. The article states that due to single-use plastics being made from fossil fuels, such as oil, the production of them emits dangerous amounts of greenhouse gases, most notably carbon dioxide. The large companies that produce this specific material often remove forested land in order to extract oil and conduct pipeline construction. This means that the amount of carbon dioxide removed from the atmosphere is also limited due to the lack of trees. It also goes without saying that any wildlife living in those areas are completely decimated due to the complete upheaval of their habitats. Hearing these facts about how our plastic packaging that we see in every supermarket is obviously very disturbing. However, I believe it would also be accurate to say that, to my generation at least, these facts are very trivial. We have all been taught this in school from a young age, and I feel this has created a culture of helplessness and anxiety around how we feel about single-use plastic consumption and what we can actually do to stop these issues from carrying on. This leads me on to answering the second point of what happens to these single-use materials once they are no longer used to us anymore. It's simple. Much like in Bennett's article, they will end up in landfill. This again is obviously a fact that no one wants to hear, especially when we are all trying our best to follow the guidelines set out by the government regarding how to dispose of certain materials. For example, putting single-use washed plastics and paper-based materials in separate recycling bins. An article published by Friends of the Earth back in 2016 stated that the 2003 Household Waste Recycling Act caused the percentage of materials recycled in the UK to increase to 43% in 2016. This brings me on to the point I have made previously regarding the guilt around disposing of our waste. Not only single-use plastics and cans, but clothing and other everyday items. Taking it back to the beginning of this short film, I was doing the simple and pretty boring task of cleaning my bedroom. When I sit and watch the video back and only notice now the sheer amount of stuff I have accumulated in my time. The fast fashion trends, overconsumption, and the need for change have seemed to always have a hold on me like no other, always replacing old garments with new, cheap bits of tat. I know this is something that we are all guilty of because it is encouraged by our society and the throwaway culture we have fostered over the decades. Furthermore, news articles and campaigns by the government are adding to the pile, being told that we are the main cause for the rubbish that piles up in landfill. In my opinion, it would not be fair to say that these recycling campaigns and messages pushed by the media are simply pushing blame onto the general public rather than onto the people that actually have control on where the waste materials go once they have been recycled. To conclude this short film, I would like to round off some of the points that I have made throughout. From my bedroom shelves to the rubbish in the bins in the street, all of it is matter and it all impacts our environment and the wider world. One thing I have really taken from both the article and artwork discussed in this film is that it is so important to consider the necessity and need for the new material I am purchasing. However, also looking at the bigger picture is vital to remember that you are not the sole reason we are having a waste disposal crisis. It is unfortunately unavoidable in most situations to be able to steer clear from single-use packaging and plastics. This is due to how prevalent it is in today's society. Being able to experience the crackle between these two sources